If Grenada in the West Indies is a destination you're considering for work, rest, or play, this video will give you an insight as to what it's like to live here. I was asked to join Dr. Kellon Bubb, the presenter of one of Grenada's foremost current affairs show, to discuss the recent US travel advisory. But rather than just give my slightly biased opinion, I asked one of my clients who moved here from the US close to a year ago to give his take on what life in Grenada is really like.
Here to discuss travel tourism in the face of an international travel advisory. I'm joined by Zoe Smith, who is a travel consultant. We also have with us today Dr. Robert Moss, who is an American expat in Grenada. I suppose he now calls Grenada home. We also have Mr. Elvis Lewis, who is the president of the Grenada Hotel and Tourism Association. And of course, my former PBC classmate, schoolmate, not classmate. I have to make that correction. Class of 97, always will be. Randy Dolland, who is, of course, the chairman of the Grenada Tourism Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Bubb.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to begin, before I get to Mr. Dolland and Mr. Lewis, I want to begin with Ms. Smith and Dr. Moss about, of course, Dr. Ross, yes. I want to begin with you, ladies and gentlemen, to have a conversation about the unique selling proposition of Grenada in this period and the work that you've been doing. As though you've done a lot of work around the Exodus Collective, and I believe your marketing is very niche in the sense that it really attracts people of color, right? And of course, Dr. Ross, is a person of color. So Zoe, I want to begin with you. Let us talk about Grenada's unique selling proposition in the context of attracting people of African descent in the diaspora to Grenada.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to be here. I've been a long-time fan of the show.
Thank you.
When it comes to Grenada, I don't really, because I'm not in the tourism space, I don't feel it as an island that can be sold. I feel Grenada is what it is, and either it resonates with people or it doesn't. So people, you're trying to encourage people to come here. I don't. Either you get it or you don't.
But Dr. Ross, welcome to the Bubb Report here. So talk to us, Dr. Ross. You and I share the distinction of being HBCU graduates. You at Morehouse. You're a Morehouse man. You are a Morehouse man, sir. So, so let us talk about why Grenada. How did you find out about Grenada? And what attracted you to the island?
Right. Well, as I was approaching retirement age, I began to explore a lot of different areas around the world as the where to sort of settle as I did that. And it so happened, I'd gone to Cuba, Barbados, Belize, several countries in Europe and stuff. But back in 2024, I was on YouTube and I somehow happened upon the Exodus Collective. And I saw Zoe and her presentations, and they were sort of non-dressed up. She just told it like it was. And, with all the warts and the acne scars and everything else to go along with it. So I decided to call her. We talked, and I made a visit to Grenada, and I stayed about 10, 12 days in Morne Rouge. And I really liked what I saw. I liked the pace of life, having grown up in the rural South during the Jim Crow era, and what was going on since shortly after Obama was elected and the political changes in the United States. The fact that my youngest son had gotten his PhD and no longer needed his father around as somewhat of a shepherd. And the fact is that my house I lived in Pacific Palisades in California. My house burned down in January. And just a month before, Zoe and I had been talking about my coming back to Grenada. So with my house gone, my kids doing their own things, and no place to stay, I decided to come to Grenada.
Mhm,
And so
mhm,
as I did so, I just been in Southern Africa because I saw that Trump was sort of gaining steam within the electorate, and I decided this place is not for me anymore. It resembled my growing up in South Georgia,
mhm,
and
mhm.
that was pretty much it in a nutshell.
I'm glad you referenced the current political environment because there is a podcast that I follow as well. It's called Brexit Global. And
Mhm.
really, it speaks to the number of African Americans who have left the United States
Yes.
following the rise of this authoritarian dictator that we have in the United States now. And I would share this quick anecdote. I always say to people, the first time that I experienced racism was when I immigrated to the United States. And I
Mhm.
remember the exact moment it happened and the microaggressions that I had to deal with from a white woman. They call them Karens.
Mhm.
And that was the decision. And it was at that point that I made the decision that I wanted to have an HBCU experience, which is
I
what led me to
understand.
Howard University.
Mhm.
So of course, everything that's happening now, of course, is not only domestic politics, but that domestic politics has spilled over into geopolitics, and now we see
Yes.
this quote unquote travel advisory against
Yes.
Grenada. So I want you
Yes.
to pick up on that and why African Americans, in particular, are deciding to leave the United States and find safe havens like Grenada. Because again, in our heads, the idea of a tourist or the idea of an expat is some white person wearing a coconut hat with a Hawaii shirt, sipping on a margarita.
Yes. Yes.
So let's talk about that. Let us talk about why people are leaving to find spaces like Grenada.
Well, I think there are various reasons. One, recognizing the political situation in the United States, as well as the cost of living. It's incredible. There are a lot of people are now, have businesses that they can take anywhere on the world via their laptops and do that. I think early on, say like in the early teens, Portugal was sought out as a place to go. I was
Mhm,
there about 3 years ago, and they had nothing, no sign, no stone, no obelisk or anything, recognizing that Portugal had achieved its wealth through stealing of enslaved people from west coast of Africa and other things. And so clearly Portugal was on my list. But when I saw that, I decided this is not a place for Black people. And I think a lot of Blacks who have moved there are sort of feeling that it's not a place for them. I've also, learned that a lot of Blacks in America have gone to West Africa, and they're finding out it's not the place for them either. I think sometimes we carry around with us this sort of stylized image of what it's like to return to the mother country. But, a few hundred years have gone between our ancestors being stolen from there and taken to the States or to the Caribbean. Um, but so I think there are multiple reasons for people leaving, but the bulk of American Blacks stay in America. I think they really hope and pray that this country is going to one day recognize them, but it is never going to be the case from my perspective. I see how the world has almost gone back to the outlines of Jim Crow. Um,
yeah.
uh,
Mhm,
vis-a-vis Black people in the country. So
mhm.
I hope that helps a little bit.
Yes.
Uh,
No.
in,
No. Yeah. 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 Absolutely, Zoya. Zoya, I'll bring you back. Let's see if it's much better. Yes, it's much better. Yes. Yes. So I want you to pick up on everything that Dr. Ross just articulated here, and the kinds of communication that you have. Of course, you also have a social media presence. So I suspect, as Dr. Ross just articulated, he reached out to you, and I suspect others like him are doing the same.
Yes. I mean, yeah, as I was saying, I started documenting my journey because I'm a former journalist. And I think telling alternative stories is really important. I think, as you're saying, the idea of the typical person who comes to Grenada or who lives in Grenada from overseas is someone who has tons of money, is retired. And that isn't necessarily the case. Lots of us who are relatively younger come, set up businesses, buy property, invest. And I think in terms of developing the island in a way that isn't extractive, that is less sensitive to geopolitical tensions, getting people who actually want to invest in Grenada and not just to extract is something that I find quite curious. And as I started telling my story and telling the stories of others who'd also returned to other islands around the Caribbean, more and more people started reaching out. And even when in the so-called global north, people started getting pulled back to the office, others were like, no, like this isn't working for us. I want to be elsewhere. I want to be somewhere safe. I want to be somewhere where people actually say hello to me in the morning, where I can let my children run in the streets without worrying they're going to be kidnapped, where I can leave my purse without worrying I'm going to get mugged or get it stolen. And I think in terms of quality of life, Grenada really, I'm biased, but I think it's streets above so many other places. And as I was saying before, the sound issues. What's interesting is that this advisory has come from the United States, of all places. And I actually have a couple who are due to move here in 2 weeks' time from Minnesota. And the reason that they fast forwarded their their transition is exactly because people are getting shot in the streets by the state. So
Yeah.
the irony of a state warning that Grenada is unsafe to travel, where it's unsafe for their citizens to even walk down the street, is very curious to me. But the sad thing is that this seems to be a trend globally. I mean, not globally, but in particular countries, in the UK as well. We're moving more and more to the right. I'm having more and more, not just Grenadians, but folks from the wider Caribbean diaspora want to understand what their citizenship options are, want to understand what their options are within CARICOM CSME in terms of establishing businesses. So I feel that while the focus definitely is on tourism, there is also a significant market who want to have a more permanent or more regular base in the Caribbean.
Let me bring back Zoe and Dr. Ross here. So Zoe, you've heard, you've just heard these conversations we're having here about people's experiences while on the island. But let us talk about, again, some of the people that you have engaged with. What has their experience been like? Some of them, of course, who, are engaging in more longer stays in Grenada.
Yeah, no, the point about customer service definitely made me smile.
Yes.
I think my take is, if customer service is something that's exceptionally important to you and you find it very triggering, you might want to consider other destinations, because the culture is what the culture is. And clearly there's a journey to be moved along, but it moves at its own pace. And you're coming to an island that exists. It's not here just to please you. So I think it's important that we're honest about Grenadians, about our ups and our downs, and to recognize that some of our downs people from elsewhere might find challenging, and the process of us moving through that might be a little slow. So I mean, I get asked for money often from some of the men here. I'm like, you probably have more money than me, or like, next time when I have money, okay. I mean, I don't take it personally. And I think your point of answering people back, it's just so that you're not ignoring them, I think that can minimize some of the hassle. But I definitely feel, for me, because I work with people who are exploring multiple Caribbean destinations, the sort of person who comes to Grenada is really looking for quality of life, is really looking for a place where they can be at peace. I often find that if you have a very low boredom threshold, Grenada might not necessarily be the place for you. If you want next day Amazon Prime deliveries, if you want cinemas and malls, to be constantly entertained, Grenada probably isn't going to be the place that will bring you peace. But if you are content with great people, great conversation, being in nature, moving at a much slower pace, having the beach to yourself, I think those are the sort of things that appeal to people who come here. And I think one of the things that I have as someone who has a background in international development is that while tourism can be a fantastic driver of growth, in order for it to be sustainable, if it feels like there are really expensive high-end hotels being built and mega yachts coming in and people with lots and lots of money, but none of that is trickling down to the ordinary people on the ground. I think that's where resentment and misunderstanding can build. And then that's when, there become more tension. So one of the things that I often say is that I'm sure Trinidad was once a really lovely tropical island, but after decades and decades of growing inequality, as a consequence, there are tensions that emerge. So one of the things that I'm really keen to see is how Grenada can avoid going down that trajectory. So especially with the work that I do, even if we do a tour, I'll make sure that at least 6 or 7 Grenadians get paid, so that money trickles down and gets out into communities and also gets beyond St. George's itself. So I think when we think about what development looks like as a nation, yes, pleasing those from outside, but also making sure that all of us are getting a seat at the table and everyone feels that they have a stake and benefit from Grenada's development. I think that's what true sustainable development looks like, especially if we want to keep things equal and secure. And I think that's one of the sort of things that Maurice Bishop spoke about, when not focusing so much on tourism, that the local people end up being deprioritized. It has to be a symbiotic relationship. And I think that's why the people who I work with often come wanting to give back. They're very much my line of, don't just sit on the beach drinking a pina colada. They understand that if you say to me, I just want to buy a CBI passport, or I just want to drill for oil, or I just want to rip up tons of rainforest, I'm not going to be the person to work with you, because I feel like the island should benefit from you being here, because I live here. I think it's very easy to give a lot of misinformation, but then you're going to run into me at the bank or in a supermarket queue, and you'll know that I've told you a whole lot of lies. So I think Grenada is, because of its size, it keeps you honest. And I think ideally it should attract the sort of people who want to be honest as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned that sustainable tourism bit here, because I think when people think about sustainability, they only think about, getting rid of plastics. They think about, doing good things to the reefs, but they don't think about that exploitative nature of tourism that exists. It's extremely exploitative. And I remember Angelique Nixon, who is an academician from Trinidad and Tobago, she wrote a book. I have it in my library there, but which really speaks to this perpetuation of a plantation tourism economy. Yeah. So I want you to pick up on that idea.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I think it's something that Fiona at Know Your Caribbean does quite a lot. And she actually has a directory of locally owned businesses in the Caribbean tourism industry, which actually aren't the majority, which is quite worrying. But I often, and even it goes back to the customer service experience. If I go to a bar and try to order a drink, and then the person at the bar looks at me like I'm causing them a problem, I can feel a certain way about it. But then if I reflect on, okay, how much is this person earning? What circumstances have they come from? What is the environment that they're living in? If I know that the model of tourism is basically paying them minimum wage so that people higher up get the profits and those profits are then sent overseas, that is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for me as a person wanting to have a good experience. And it's not sustainable cumulatively for the island, for the vast majority of people to not actually be profiting, and not to go on a rant. But I feel that this is an issue beyond tourism. I think in so many sectors, that issue of making sure that locally Grenadians have a stake and are fairly paid, and that it's not exploitative. Decades after, or centuries after the ending of slavery, that plantation model really does have to shift. And I think my one way of doing it is working with people who understand that. And who are very committed to not playing a part in that. I mean, Dr. Ross worked as a psychoanalyst for many years. He doesn't need to work, but coming to Grenada, and I'm not trying to get him into more work, but coming to Grenada, he has seen the need and he's volunteered his time. And I think really, tapping into the energy of Grenada as an island that does believe in better and that can do better and knows that the degrees of connection are so small that the small actions that we take can have very significant ripple effects, really attracting those sorts of people, whether it's tourists or for longer term stays or for the diaspora coming back from overseas or from other Caribbean islands. I think that to me is what sustainability looks like, because then it becomes not just sustainability, it becomes regenerative. If we understand that a lot of damage was done during the colonial era, during the plantation era, and that if we want different for the future, we need to start making wiser choices now. I think that is where the conversation really starts to get quite exciting, and the scope for social innovation really becomes something really interesting for us as a nation to explore, because Barbados isn't doing it, Jamaica isn't doing it, neither is the Dominican Republic. So I think that's where we have a regional competitive advantage.
Dr. Ross, I want to loop you back in, sir. If you can just turn your camera on. I'm not sure if you left and have gone to a beach or somewhere here, but you've traveled a lot, sir. You've been to the motherland. You said you've been to other places, and you've settled on Grenada.
Yes.
You really started to talk about your experience in Grenada, but I want you to pick up on some of the conversations we've been having here around the experience that people have when they visit Grenada, and really on what Zoe just articulated here around ensuring that Grenada is able to maintain that authenticity that it has, right? That Grenada does not want to run the risk of becoming a mass tourism space like the Dominican Republic, a place I would never visit for a number of reasons. One of which is the mistreatment of our Haitian brothers and sisters. But that aside, I want you to reflect on that, your experience in Grenada, and in the context of that unique proposition that Grenada offers.
Right. Well, I think part of it is just the sort of friendliness of the people. Growing up in the States and stuff like that, when I left the South, I was in California. It's a car-driven society, so people very seldomly see each other on the streets and say hello. Because of the construction of the new water system pipelines in Grenada, you're driving along and being caught in the traffic. I see, hey, Dr. Ross, how are you? I said, whoa. Gosh, people actually remember me and say hello and stuff like that. But it is like that. I go to Grenada quarantine point every morning to go for a walk, and the guy who is in charge of opening the gates, he just told me, look, if you want to get in, you do this. If I'm not here, stuff like that. People are very, very open and friendly. I do agree, with what Zoe was saying, that how we treat people. It has a lot to do with whether people are open to you. Just driving down the street and waving at people. They remember you the next time you come through that area and wave again. The smiles that occur on people's faces and things like that. One thing I hadn't expected was the level of poverty and stuff. Sort of going in different areas, I see the great need, of being able to give. And I hope during my stay here, at least until I die, to be able to give something to the people to help out. I see kids with uniforms. I find out some of these families, they can't afford to buy these uniforms for their kids to go to school. It's a real struggle. So I think helping out in just small ways like that, and notwithstanding, my training as a psychiatrist and a psychoanalyst over the years, that's something that can be helpful too. But, just making direct help to people when they're trying to struggle getting their kids back into school and things of that sort. And, I saw one school where kids are drinking water from a hose, not to say there's anything wrong with drinking from a hose, because I did that growing up, but it's sort of like coming from the States and seeing it, say, whoa, what happened here? These kinds of things. But the people are really genuine, the ones I've met, the ones that Zoe has introduced me to. There's some really nice people who are trying to do things for and with the people of the island, I think.
Absolutely. And so I want to bring back, and then we're just going to have a broad set of a broad conversation here too, and then we'll get to closing comments. But let's get to Mr. Lewis and Mr. Dolan here. Mr. Dolan, you've heard both Zoe and Robert about just imagining what Grenada currently is and what we don't want Grenada to become in the context of other tourism destinations in the Caribbean. I want you to pick up on what they've been articulating, Randy.
Well, these are fantastic points. And remember, when I started the segment, I spoke about a more holistic approach, right? I didn't just focus on, you know what, we have great hotels, cruises are doing well, let's just stick to that. I took about our holistic approach. We spoke about the blue economy, fisheries, agriculture, training, education, and all of it. The reality is Grenada has only 1,800 hotel rooms, right? So when we speak about that in terms of scale, most cruise ships that you see coming in during the week has more hotel rooms than the island of Grenada, right? So we have the great opportunity to build a hotel system, or rather a hotel, but rather a tourism system that is inclusive. And the GTA, as well as some other bodies, we can actually work with, like, for example, our small vendors or small business owners to help them develop how they package, how they market themselves. We had that training going on. We had that training last year. We have more training coming up again this year, where we try to help them to get out of the hustle mindset, but into the small business. I'm a small business operator. Get into that frame of mind. We're actually now working with Grenada Cooperative Bank and other providers to ensure that they are now able to have access to tap to pay from the credit card companies. Because what you're seeing now is increasingly visitors are not traveling with cash in their pocket. They have money, but they don't have cash in their pocket. And if you're unable to use technology right now to receive payment, then you're going to get left. Especially now as you see how the world is going, where people don't even carry their physical credit cards anymore. It's all on their phones. And you have to be able to position yourself where your product it stands out, it's well presented, there's a desire to purchase it, and they're able to purchase it. I know I personally don't even carry cash anymore. So if I have to get something from one of the small businesses, I have to go to the bank and then come back. But I could give it to you immediately if you have the tap. And we are pushing that heavily now for most of our small businesses, because we're trying to upskill them in that manner. So when we speak about collective benefit, and especially in the yachting and marine section, we know that there's a huge gap to fill there, because there's demand for these products, there's demand for service, and that is a creation of high-paying jobs and opportunity for our local people, especially the provision that comes with it. Most of the times they want the fresh fruits, the fresh vegetables, and the fresh catch from the sea. And there's opportunity there to continue to have that money directly filter into the economy. And again, the way we position Grenada, that destination, again, it's not just about the pina coladas, but go out into the community. We focus a lot on the culinary aspect of it, where we encourage you to go to the small restaurants and enjoy the food, and not just in Grandans, but especially in the north, especially in Caracou. One of my favorite restaurants is Armadillo in the north of the country. Always stop at Belmont. You can go to Chef Andre Bernard's restaurant up in St. Andrew. And there's so much to see and explore with the destination. So, and that is a type of, tourism that we're building. And when you even think about the higher end hotels that are coming on stream, a lot of them cater to the local customer as well. You can walk into pretty much all of them at any point to go in for a birthday celebration, because you see that there often. Birthday, anniversary celebration, or whatever that's happening, because it has to be inclusive. And when I speak again about all of the infrastructural work, the educational development, is all about how we can collectively rise to produce a sustainable tourism economy that benefits everybody. So we have that opportunity now, before we start really scaling to 4,000 plus rooms, that we can collectively take everybody along with us, and we could collectively benefit from us, because ultimately tourism just can't work for the few at the top or the 5%. It has to work for everybody. And once we are able to do that, it is proven that it does have great economic impact and can create good benefit for livelihoods for everybody.
Mr. Lewis, is there anything else you wish to add on that point? And you're talking about scaling up. I'm sorry, I can't help it, Mr. Dolan. I take great exception to that monstrosity that's been put up there in Livra. I just have to say it. It's at a national park. We talking about sustainable tourism, and we're talking about pure Grenada and all of that, and people come in for that unique selling proposition. What is that? It's a monstrosity. I'm sorry, I just have to say it. I'm known to speak my mind on these issues. I'm an environmentalist. It's something that I remember going when I was in high school at PBC. We would go up there to watch the turtles nest their eggs at night. That is gone now. But that aside, Mr. Lewis.
So, you know, everybody has made some very valid points. And I want to come back to something that Zoe said earlier. You know, get in to ensure that people in the outlying areas in our villages in the north, etc., actually are getting the filtered dollar down to them. Okay, I think that's an important part of something we've been having a conversation about called community tourism.
Yes.
One of the issues we face in Grenada is a national transportation system that can traffic people from the south, from the north, back and forth, and visitors. We don't have that in Grenada. Our bus system, which is not a national system, but it's an individual operated system that serves national interests. By 9 o'clock, you can't be in Soteres as a visitor going to a local tourist destination of their local restaurant and get back to St. George's. You'd have to rent a car, you have to rent a taxi. So we've limited ourselves a little bit, and it's something I hope, whether it's this administration or future administrations, look at in developing some sort of a national transportation system, which will not only help the movement, of course, but it will help us tap into a job pool of people who live out in the out areas that don't think it's economically feasible for them to come and work in St. George's. Because by the time they pay a bus and move back and forth, they don't have any money left. What's the point? So there are a lot of little things that have to happen. You know, the chairman said something about 4,000 rooms. For us to get there, that we have some infrastructure that we have to do to ensure that we can support and use the word sustain that sort of a growth.
And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Of course, before we get to our panel for closing comments, I just want to reminisce on Kabiye Beach. Shameless plug now. Although Kabiye Beach is next to Crowshoe Beach in St. Andrew, those of us who live in St. David on the border of St. Andrew, Lambert Bridge area, Kabiye Beach was one of those beaches that informed our childhood growing up. So it was, it was Latan Beach, yes, but more so Kabiye Beach is a beach that we frequented a lot. It's a very pure and on-sport beach. Dr. Ross, whenever you get the opportunity, I want to encourage you to visit Kabiye Beach in Crowshoe, St. Andrew. It's a beautiful beach. The water is relatively calm, and it's very clean. It's for the most part, it's a very secluded beach, except on weekends when folks are frequented a lot. So again, that beach is part of my childhood. I took some drone shots while I was there.
How do you spell it?
Cabier.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Thank
Kabiye
you.
Beach. It's yes. So it's my favorite beach, but it's my favorite beach.
I'll look into it. I'll
Yes,
check it
absolutely.
out.
Okay. Okay. So viewers, let me bring back the panel here for some closing comments. And Zoe, thank you for joining us today on the program. I do follow your work on YouTube, the Exodus Collective, I believe it is called. Yes. And you do very important work of really showing up Grenada. And it was very fascinating following your journey, returning to Grenada and giving context to that returning to, a place that you love and cherish so much. So I'll go over to you for some closing comments.
Yeah, when are you coming back?
Yes.
No, this has been a really fascinating program to be involved in. And I guess I'm in the privileged position of not having a job where I'm responsible for tourism. So it's very easy for me to come up with ideas and think about what could or couldn't happen.
Yes.
But I think even in the way in which we're talking about Carnival, about JAB, and talking about Carnival, about Grenada's beach, I think there's a real opportunity for us to understand, and I know it sounds strange coming with someone with my accent, but who are we as Grenadians? Because even our Carnival is about a lot more than JAB. We have Vector, we have Wild Indian, we have, so if someone wants to experience traditional mass, they could go stay in the Victoria area. If you want to experience a different Juve, you have St. David's, you have Soteres. So I think really us understanding who we are as a people, what are our values, what matters to us, and how do you really access that knowledge of who we are. You know, some of the work that I'm doing is with Bonaire Government School up in St. Mark's, working with the original plantation owners up in Scotland and reconnecting the dots so that people who've grown up on this land and who've been impacted by that history really understand the wealth and the resilience and so much that they have to offer. So whether it comes to the relics and the architecture and the archaeology that they could offer in terms of community tourism, or understanding the ways in which their food is influenced by West Africa, you know, that level of knowledge replicated across the island, one, it gives us an opportunity in terms of community tourism, but also it helps us to really stand proud as a people to understand who we come from. So for me, because it's not my job, I get to think about that and have conversations and facilitate work in those sorts of areas. But as a Grenadian and as someone who's trying to understand what sustainability looks like and who is inviting people here, us as a nation really standing strong in our identity, I don't think there's any way in which we can go wrong with that, regardless of what Trump says with his ridiculous warnings and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Ross?
You know, I was listening to everybody. It's been a lesson. Sort of feel like an anthropologist here, sort of hearing what some of the problems are, and even some of the celebrations here, the problems that it entail, the aftermath of these celebrations, like Spice Mass and stuff like that. But on a more personal level, there's a little school that I'm hoping to get involved in a place called Corinth, and you know, really trying to help in a small way some of these families that may have some difficulty in just doing some of the basic things. I mean, I found out that textbooks cost so much money here that people can't afford it. They may be 3 or 4 weeks before they can get a reader for their kids and stuff like that. I mean, I grew up in the South in a place where all of our books were hand-me-down from white people. It was in 4th grade before I had a book with a cover to it, you know, maybe the experience here in Grenada, I don't know. But, you know, some of those things, having grown up in poverty myself, you know, it leaves something. And it also leaves a wish to sort of leave the world a little bit better off if you can. Although Trump is to sort of negate a lot of those good wishes and being helpful. But thank you so much for allowing me a chance to interact and hear some of the issues that Grenada is facing. Some of them Zoe's talked to me about, but others in some small way, I hope I can participate more.
Just as an aside, Dr. Ross, you said you grew up in the South. Where in the South did you grow up?
In Georgia. I grew up.
You grew up in the Jim Crow South, so you experienced the Jim Crow era.
Oh yes.
So everything that's happening in the United States currently, you experience a lot of that.
Yes, absolutely. There are very few of us left, you know, who actually went through all of that, getting off the sidewalk for white people, going to back doors, all this kind of stuff. Just being aware that your life could be snatched away at any moment. So feeling and seeing ICE doing these same things, you know, right down the road from where I live was the head of the KKK. So, you know, it's just growing up in terror and now seeing it come back again.
Yeah, so, it's history repeating itself, and I really wish our people in the Caribbean would acknowledge that, and you know, especially some of our pick-me's. But that's for another conversation. Mr. Dolan, sir, over to you, sir, for some closing comments.
Well, again, I'd like to thank, you know, the panel for the wonderful discussion today. Thank you to you for facilitating, and to you and your viewers, all of them overseas who are battling the cold. You know, Grenada is always warm. We look forward to having you come back and welcome you here. There's some flight cancellations that's disrupting the schedule a little bit today and tomorrow. But, you know, once you get on a flight, you know, please make it home. But I think that ultimately, to close out, I would just like to say that, you know, we understand the concerns. I think that we're blessed that some of the concerns that we do have are not much deeper, right, than other destinations. The fact that Grenada still remains one of the safest Caribbean destinations, you know, statistically, that is a fact. The fact that we get to enjoy this beauty every day, we're truly blessed for it. And I think the holistic approach that we're taking, not just to develop tourism, but the economy and our people, is the focus of this administration. And the push to do so, to ensure that everybody collectively rises and benefits, is the goal. So there are a lot of projects that are on the way to facilitate that. I know sometimes there's a lot of upset caused because of the inconvenience with some of the things that are happening now. But we know ultimately the goal is to get to a much better place, to build a much stronger country, a much stronger premier tourism destination, and ensure that we are all the benefactors of it, the people of our beautiful Tri-Island state. So again, thank you again for this opportunity. And we look forward to a strong 2026, continue to have record numbers, record arrivals. Doesn't matter what happens externally, we're focused on what we have to do from the Tourism Authority. So we're going to be pushing forward. We're going to continue to work closely with all of our partners, including the GHTA, Blue Economy and Agriculture and everyone else. And we're just going to continue to be resilient. And that's all that we can do at this point, is focus on our business, be resilient, and continue to push Grenada forward.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you can only control what can control. I think it's very important to make that point. And of course, our final panelist here, that's Mr. Elvis Lewis. Again, thank you, sir, for appearing on the Bubb Report. And over to you, sir, for some closing comments.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Bubb. I really appreciate the opportunity. Fellow panelists, thank you very much. Thoughts and ideas flow, and out of this, I think we can work towards a few things. But before I actually say a few tourism comments,
yes,
I just want to let my GBSS listeners know that I'm surrounded by a bunch of PBC folks. So I'm standing proud, a GBSS class of 76. Just got to say that, okay? Dr. Ross, you made a very interesting comment. You said you're a psychologist. Is that correct?
I'm a psychiatrist. Psychoanalyst, yes.
And you want to help young people. We have a after-school program in Montu with an average of about 42 kids. It's a very tough neighborhood in Grenada, and I would really like to get your service to help with some of the challenges we face with young people. So you can reach me through the GHTA, and I would love to get your services there.
Fine, thank you.
It's a great program for young people, and we average close to 40 students sometimes, and it's purely an after-school program.
Okay.
What's your comment? Listen, Grenada's tourism product is strong, very, very strong. We have some challenges, like any destination in the Caribbean region, and I think the work between the GHTA and the GTA, we've really solidified that partnership. We were asked to be back on the board 2 years ago, representing the accommodation sector, the dive sector, the tour operators that make up the membership of the GHTA. The chairman and I have a fantastic relationship and conversations. The CEO of the GTA and the CEO of the GHTA are working a lot closer together. And the end product, everything is focused on doing the best for Grenada with tourism. We may not get it right all the time, but there's a saying that says the constant pursuit for excellence is something that we're continuously trying. So people who have input and thoughts about what we may be doing wrong or ideas that we can enhance what we're doing, send them in. Don't keep them to yourselves. Don't criticize. Offer them. We may not necessarily agree with every idea or may be able to implement every idea, but it will be good to have them, and they can have conversations that hopefully can result in real change that elevates tourism in Grenada, locally and internationally. So thank you again, fellow panelists. Really love chatting with you guys. Dr. Bubb, thank you again for the invitation. Truly appreciate
Absolutely. Panelists, thank you so much. And there are other questions when the program is done. Mr. Dolan, Mr. Lewis, Dr. Ross, somebody's asking, where in Georgia are you from?
It's a little town called Bainbridge. It's down in Tallahassee, Florida. Yeah. Bainbridge. Which part of that? Which part?
Richard Holston is asking which part of Georgia is Dr. Ross. So Bainbridge. There we go. And then I believe Elimas Gilbert, Inspector, good to see that you're watching. Quickly, you're saying that people come to Grenada for jab. Full stop, period. Of course, he's an entertainer, so he's a well-respected, but he's a veteran. He's a veteran, so respect Dr. Jocelyn. Yes, go ahead.
Jab Jab is a hook, but we have so much more to offer, and that is what we will continue to expand on. Like, I mean, my favorite is a vehicle. But the
Yeah,
reality is that we can't go selling vehicle because nobody's going to know what you're talking about. But we will continue to grow that. We will continue. But yeah, Jab Jab is the hook.
yeah, it
But
definitely is
we
the
do
hook.
have a lot.
Yeah.
We do have a lot more to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, panelists, thank you all again. Again, I'm looking outside my window here from my home study, and yeah, it's snowing. It's snowing heavy. And
Well, you know, there's a saying, right? Sorry to interrupt you. There's a saying. There are two types of people in the winter, right? Those who freeze and those who go out and enjoy it.
yeah,
So go get it. So get your sled. Go build a snowman.
I'm looking out my window right now, and it's beautiful and sunny, at about 86 degrees. Just saying, you know.
Yeah,
don't
I'm looking
say,
directly on
don't go
the
there.
beautiful beach.
Don't go there. You all are hurting my feelings right now. Okay.
Oh, come on
You
home.
see it
Come
back
on
of
home.
me, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's what's missing right there.
That's right.
Just showing you, okay? All right.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much,
Thank
ladies
you.
and gentlemen. Thank you for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. Viewers and listeners,
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
we want to thank our panelists for agreeing to join us today for a conversation on travel and tourism in the face of this so-called travel advisory, and that's why I put travel advisory in close quotes there. But I want us to go down memory lane a bit. Now, during the Grenada Revolution, 1979 to 1983, the U.S. government strongly discouraged travel to Grenada, particularly as tensions peaked in October 1983. In fact, some of the travel advisories that they said back then, they said that they were armored cars. And again, that was before the collapse of the regime in 1983. But they were saying that there were armored cars on Grandad's Beach, that the students were being kidnapped. And, you know, it was just doom and gloom during the Grenada Revolution. And the history would record that many African Americans, in fact, visited Grenada during that period. Members of the Black Panther movement, for example, you know, I spoke with Congresswoman, I believe Barbara Lee from California. She visited Grenada during that period. Angela Davis, great activist, Black activist, Angela Davis, someone whose intellectual epistemology is what I aspire to be. She visited Grenada. In fact, they did an entire documentary called The House on Cocoa Road, chronicling her time in Grenada during the revolution. So during that period, there were a lot of people, especially our people of African descent, who saw Grenada as that ideal destination to escape from what was happening in the United States at the time. It was sort of the beginning of the crack epidemic, and it was the beginning of the so-called war on drugs on Black communities in America. A lot of African Americans visited Grenada, stayed in Grenada for long periods of time during that era. In fact, we had a delegation from the Institute of the Black World of the 21st Century who visited Grenada last year, I believe it was in May, to commemorate Malcolm X's mother, Louise Langdon Little, who was born in Grenada, and they erected a monument in her birthplace in Ladigue, St. Andrew. So again, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, again, in the context of geopolitics and Grenada's place in history, one should not be surprised that given the re-emergent sort of Jim Crow 2.0 authoritarianism that we're seeing, that because of Grenada's place in history, that Grenada would be targeted, especially by these folks, and given Grenada's relationships with places like Cuba and Venezuela. So I thought that it was important to say that. So again, viewers and listeners, I want to thank you for your spirited contributions for this week's edition of the program, and we will see you next week again for another installment of the Bubb Report. Take care. Bye-bye.